First aid training run by the Educational Psychology Service. My name is Rachel Board. I'm an assistant educational psychologist.
My name's Kayla Stone. I am an assistant educational psychologist.
And my name's Paige Garbett. I'm a training educational psychologist.
So today we'll be talking about psychological first aid, and I'll give a quick overview. So it provides a framework for supporting people who have witnessed a distressing event. It is a resilience-focused, supportive 5-step framework, which is both social and psychological advice. It can be delivered by anyone in a support role and is comparable to providing first aid to physical wounds. It is suitable for use with everyone in the first days, weeks and months after a crisis. This approach gives you advice on what to say and what to do for people who are very distressed. And in 2009, the World Health Organization provided guidelines that concluded that psychological first aid rather than psychological debriefing should be offered to people in severe distress. They also recommended it is the most appropriate way to help people recently affected by a traumatic event or crisis. Information on how to approach a new situation safely for yourself and others and not to cause any further harm. So how do crisis events affect people? So different kinds of events happen in the world, such as war, natural disasters, pandemics such as COVID-19, and interpersonal violence. Individuals, families, or entire communities may be affected. Although everyone is affected in some way, there are a wide range of reactions and feelings each person can have, and how someone reacts depends on many factors, including the nature and severity of the event they experience, the experience with previous distressing events, and the support that they have in their life from others, which can be families, friends, other support networks, such as groups that they belong to, their physical health, the personal and family history of mental health problems, their cultural background and traditions, and their age. For example, children of different age groups can react differently. And although everyone is affected in some way by these events, there are a wide range of reactions and feelings each person can have, as I've mentioned, and many people can feel overwhelmed, confused, or very uncertain about what is happening, particularly around COVID-19 that we're having at the moment. They may be fearful, anxious, numb, or detached in some way, and some people may have mild reactions, and then other people may have some more severe reactions. So every person has strengths and abilities, and these can help them to cope with the life challenges that they face. However, some people are particularly vulnerable in a crisis and may need extra help. This might include people who might be at risk or need additional support because of their age, such as children or the elderly, or they may have mental or physical disability, or because they belong to groups that may be marginalised or targeted for violence, for example. So what is PFA, or psychological first aid? So it's a humane, supportive response to a fellow human being who is suffering and who may need support, and that's from Spear 2011. So psychological first aid involves comforting and listening to people, but not pressuring them to talk, and helping them to feel calm and connect to information that may help support them going forward. It involves the following themes: so providing practical care and support which doesn't intrude on them, assessing the needs and concerns, helping people to address basic needs, for example, food and water, listening but not pressuring them to talk, comforting and helping to feel calm, as I've said, and protecting people from further harm. So more into psychological first aid in relation to COVID-19. There's evidence, according to various studies and the consensus of many crisis helpers, tells us that people are more likely to be able to cope with and recover from ongoing situations like COVID-19 if they feel safe, connected to others, calm and helpful, have access to social, physical and emotional support, and feel able to help themselves as individuals and communities. PFA is an alternative to psychological debriefing, which has been found to be ineffective. In contrast, psychological first aid involves factors that seem to be most helpful to people's long-term recovery. Psychological first aid is not, it's also important to understand that psychological first aid is not something that everybody affected by COVID-19 will need. It's not professional counselling or asking the person to analyse their situation and pressuring the person to talk about their feelings. It is not psychological debriefing in that it doesn't involve a detailed discussion of the events that caused the distress, and it's not asking someone to analyse what happened to them or to put time and events in order. Although psychological first aid involves being able to listen to people's stories, it is not about pressuring them to tell you their feelings and reactions to the event, and it isn't something that only professionals can do, so everyone can provide psychological first aid. Who is psychological first aid for? It is for distressed people who have been recently exposed to a serious crisis event. However, not everybody who experiences the event will need or want the support that psychological first aid provides. Do not force. It is important to remember not to force help on people who do not want it, but make yourself easily available for those who may want the support. There may be situations when someone needs more advanced support than PFA alone. Know your limits and get help from others, such as medical personnel, if available, your colleagues or other people in the area, local authorities, or community and religious leaders. People who need more immediate advanced support might be those people with more serious life-threatening injuries who need emergency medical care, people who are so upset that they cannot care for themselves or their children, or other people in their families, and people who may hurt themselves or others. When is PFA provided? It's aimed at helping people who have been very recently affected by a crisis event, and you can provide PFA when you first have contact with very distressed people. And although people may need access to help and support for a long time after the event, this usually during or immediately after the event. And you can offer PFA whenever it is safe for you enough for you to do so. Staff within schools can incorporate PFA in a typical one-to-one session with a child or young person to review how they are and offer support. Phrases such as, I want to check in with you, see how you're doing, or if you have any questions, may be useful openers. So how to help responsibly. When you take on the responsibility to help in situations where people have been affected by a distressing event, it is important to act in ways that respect the safety, dignity and the rights of the people you are helping. It's also useful to adapt what you do to take account of the person's culture, be aware of other emergency response measures, and to look after yourself. So in terms of safety, avoid putting people at further risk of harm as a result of your actions, ensure they are safe and protect them from physical or psychological harm. Dignity, treat people with respect and according to their cultural and social norms. And rights, make sure people can access help fairly and without discrimination, help people to claim their rights and access available support, and that's only in the best interest to any person that you encounter. Keep the principles in mind of all your actions and with all the people you encounter or support, whatever their age, gender or ethnic background. So in terms of emergency events and pandemics, how we respond depends on a number of factors, including how much support we have at the time, our previous experience of distressing events, our perceived capacity to cope with the situation, and the nature and severity of the situation itself. And as we've talked about in the previous slide, looking after yourself is one of the most important things. Helping responsibly also means taking care of your own health and well-being. It is important to pay extra attention to your own well-being and be sure that you are physically and emotionally able to help others. Take care of yourself so that you can best take care of others. If working in a team, be aware of the well-being of your colleagues as well. In terms of normal responses to emergency events and pandemics, there are a broad range in ways of which people react during a pandemic. Distress may be common, but in most cases it will not be associated with any lasting difficulties. Strong emotions can be seen as adaptive and normal ways of responding to the characteristics of the pandemic environment, and normal stress reactions include changes in mood, negative thoughts, physical anxiety and sleep disturbances, and general anxiety.
With someone in distress is very important because people who have been through a crisis event may be very upset, anxious, and confused, and some people may blame themselves for things that have happened during a crisis. So being calm and showing understanding can help people in distress feel more safe and secure, understood, respected, and cared for appropriately. A person who has been through a distressing event may not want to tell you their story, but listening to someone's story can be a great support. However, it's important not to pressure anyone to tell you what they've been through. Some people may not want to speak about what has happened or the circumstances. However, they may value it if you stay with them quietly, let them know you're there if they want to talk, or offer practical support, such as offering them a glass of water. It's also important not to talk too much and allow for silence. So keeping silent for a while may give the person space and encourage them to share with you if they wish. Also, to communicate well, you need to be aware of both your words and body language, such as facial expressions, eye contact, gestures, and the way that you sit or stand in relation to a child or young person or adult. Each culture has its own particular way of behaving, like particular ways of behaving that are appropriate and respectful. So you should speak and behave in ways that take into account the person's culture, age, gender, customs, and religion. Before offering psychological first aid, it's important that you have accurate information and guidance about the pandemic or the event that's going on, and the supports and resources available. Before providing psychological first aid in relation to the coronavirus pandemic, you should learn about the virus, learn about the available services and supports, and learn about safety and security concerns. You'll find up-to-date information on the government website and locally on Wolverhampton Council's advice page for coronavirus advice and information. You should also know where to signpost for support, so that could be counselling services that are available, financial support, or things such as peer support groups. It's also important to give people information in a way that people can understand. So it's important to use simple language that is accessible for the person that you're supporting. Knowing where to signpost information from will be enough, so don't let this put you off providing psychological first aid. The 7 components of psychological first aid are care, protect, comfort, support, provide, connect, and educate. You don't need to do all of these, just taking some of the elements will be helpful. In the context of providing psychological first aid to children and young people, I think that providing care and support will be the most important components in creating a secure base for children and young people to share how they're feeling. Children and young people will reflect the emotional responses of those around them. So before you start, take a moment to check in with yourself and ensure that you feel calm and clear about what you want to achieve with the intervention. So taking a few deep breaths and reminding yourself of the key messages you need to deliver will help you provide psychological first aid effectively. The first step of psychological first aid is to identify if there are any immediate needs for safety and to address these. You should work with people to help to clarify their needs and develop a plan of action. Although some immediate needs are obvious, you should always ask beforehand. So you should identify if there are any immediate needs like medical treatment, medication, food, communication, or accommodation. And in regards to coronavirus, clear advice should be provided on what to do if someone is physically unwell. So according to scientific advice, if someone has a high temperature and a continuous cough, or if they've mentioned that they have lost or changed their sense of smell or taste, then you should advise them to stay at home and self-isolate. The practical and physical needs of health responders should also be addressed. So this is in terms of wearing personal protective equipment to keep yourself safe from coronavirus if someone is displaying symptoms. Secondly, you should clarify each need with the person by talking it through and consider what assistance might help them. Thirdly, you should develop an action plan based on what resources are available and collaborate with people to enable them to make their own decisions. And finally, you should support people to put this plan into action and where possible, support them with experiencing success. Another key component of psychological first aid is protecting people from further threat and distress. So you should address any current or foreseeable future threats to a person's physical and emotional safety. So firstly, you should ensure immediate physical safety, including medical care, supervision of children and those unable to take care of themselves. You should provide clear advice for family and carers of people who are physically unwell with COVID-19 type symptoms. This may be obvious, like the need to take precautions against infection or whether or how to seek medical attention. It might be less obvious, like the risks of social isolation for those in domestically abusive relationships. Secondly, you should be accurate and honest in the information you provide. So if you feel unsure about the information that you're able to provide, it's really important to avoid speculation. So if you don't know the answer to a question, it's important to say so rather than to provide the person you're supporting with false information. Another key component of providing psychological first aid is providing comfort and consolidation for people in distress. So this is particularly important whilst working with children and young people and providing them with a secure base for them to share their feelings and worries. So firstly, you should approach people who may need support respectfully. So introduce yourself, give your name, your organisation and your role. And you should also ask people's permission for you to speak to them and ask for their names. And whilst working with adults, you should address them using their last name unless they've given you permission to call them by their first name or do otherwise. You should also listen in order to help people feel calm and speak calmly and with compassion. You should also allow plenty of time whilst talking to them and try not to look around or seem distracted. It's also important not to pressure them to talk, but listen if they do want to talk. If they appear to be very distressed, try to help them to feel calm and ensure them that they're not on their own. Lastly, you should ask about people's needs and concerns and find out what's most important to them at that moment in time and support them with working out what their priorities are. Providing psychological first aid whilst wearing PPE or personal protective equipment makes it difficult for the other person to respond to typical non-verbal signals of empathy, such as facial expressions. You may also not be able to engage with other physical forms of empathy, such as holding a person's hand to comfort them. So because of this, you may need to use more explicit verbal expressions of empathy than you would otherwise. If you'd like to, you might want to think about the kinds of things that you found comforting from other people during this time. Another key component of providing psychological first aid is providing information and support for practical tasks. So while supporting adults, this might involve supporting them with their medical needs, financial needs, childcare, or with funeral arrangements. So make sure people are informed where and how to access services, especially vulnerable people that might find it more difficult to do themselves. So you should say only what you know and don't make up the information. You should keep the messages simple and accurate and accessible for who you're talking to and repeat them often. You should explain the source and reliability of the information that you give, and know where to signpost for support. So again, that could be counselling services that are available, financial support, and peer support groups. It's also important to support people's resilience and sense of control where possible to generate their own solutions. So whilst working with children and young people, you should regularly remind them that the pandemic will end. Although it might not be tomorrow, it could be in a matter of months. So you should also remind them that the vast majority of people who contract coronavirus get better and return to their normal level of functioning, just to reassure the children. And you should remind them that they've coped with difficult situations before and succeeded. So you should draw on the positive skills and resilience developed in those situations so that they can use them now. Another key component of psychological first aid is to provide information on coping, because providing people with information and coping strategies may reduce distress. Ongoing emergency situations can be quite disorientating, confusing, and overwhelming for some people, and this can compromise their ability to cope with problems. So helping to promote effective coping is an important step in helping people adjust to what has happened and help them plan for the future. So you can help people access information online about normal reactions to extreme stress, positive coping, and self-care. You can think about different coping options that may work for the person you're supporting, and you can do this by identifying successful coping mechanisms that they've used in the past. You can also creatively adapt their normal coping strategies to social isolation conditions. So, for example, talking to family and friends for support online, using video calls and over the phone. And by identifying coping strategies that they could use, this may increase their sense of control over the situation. The coronavirus pandemic is affecting the way that we're usually able to connect with others. So we need to adapt new ways to manage and nurture our relationships, as they are massively important for getting everyone through this difficult time. You should help children and young people to stay in touch with their loved ones and maintain and support connectedness through supporting children and young people as therapeutic parents in the children and young people secure estate. And you should ensure all contact with children and young people is meaningful. You could also normalise the coronavirus lockdown experience and reinforce the message that we're all in this together and we will all get through it together. So positive affirmations such as "we can do this" may be helpful. And people recover more quickly when they're connected to family and friends, because it supports a sense of self-worth, well-being, confidence and hope, the sharing of experiences and concerns, making sense of what has happened, establishes a degree of normality, participation in problem solving and supporting others, and the general sharing of information.
Connecting is especially important in the context of social distancing, to support people to connect with their natural support networks, including their loved ones, friends and communities. Obviously, we're living in times where physical connection isn't possible due to isolation measures. So it's about being creative in ways to maintain this social connection. We need to make sure people know how to access means of communication adapted to their needs, especially vulnerable people. So a lot of our connection at the moment is through virtual means, so it's supporting children and young people and other staff members and making sure that they're able to access these means of communication. It's supporting access to community and religious support, so connecting up with community groups with where the children and young people are living, or staff members again. And being aware of and linking to people with local and national online resources and supports. People may need help or encouragement to connect through the internet, by phone, or other means. The final key component of psychological first aid that we're going to discuss is educate. So educating about normal responses. It's important to understand that the most common responses and reactions to an ongoing pandemic situation, so you can help people understand and normalise their reactions. It's normal for people to have strong emotions with the current times. We're living in uncertain and unprecedented times, so feeling a range of emotions is normal, and people need to be reminded and reassured of this. Psychological reactions to pandemics and any other kind of crisis can be best understood as the reactions of normal human beings to sudden, unexpected and unpredictable threats. The times that we're living at the moment, we're not sure what's going to happen next, and that can lead to people feeling really, really stressed. But everybody may feel that way, and it's making sure people who are feeling this way know that that's a normal response. Intense emotions will come and go, so you'll have your good and your bad days, which again is a normal reaction, and people will have a range of reactions, and it's reassuring people that there is no right or wrong way to think, feel or respond to the current situation. We can learn together with a colleague or a friend. We can use reputable sites like the NHS that we mentioned earlier. Ending your health. So this is equally as important as all the other components. When and how you end your health will depend on the context of the crisis, your role and situation, and the needs of the people that you are supporting. Use your best judgment of the situation. If it's appropriate, explain to the person you believe in, and that another person will be helping them from that point on if that is going to happen. If you link the person to other services, let them know what to expect. Ensure that they have the details to these services. Ensure that you say goodbye in a positive way by wishing them well. So end it in a positive way. Reflect on the experience and ensure that they understand fully that your health will be ending at that point. People who are likely to need special attention. All people have resources to cope, including those who are vulnerable. You can help vulnerable people to use their own coping resources and strategies. So a group of people who may need special attention are children and young people, so adolescents. How children react to the hardships of crisis depends on their age and developmental stage. In general, children and young people can cope better when they have a stable, calm adult around them, which obviously we've mentioned before, that if you're going to provide this support, you need to make sure that your own well-being is where it needs to be so that you can take on these extra demands. Second group of people that may need extra attention are people with health conditions and disabilities. People with chronic conditions, with physical and mental disabilities, or who are elderly may need special help, including helping them get into a safe place and basic support and healthcare. As well as we mentioned in the Connect stage, they may need additional support with being able to move around the virtual world and staying in connection with their family members and friends. Third group of people are people at risk of discrimination or violence. These may include women, people from certain ethnic or religious groups, and people with disabilities. They may need special protection to be safe in a crisis situation and may need extra help to address their basic needs and access available services. Provide information on available services and help them to link directly with those services when necessary. To support these people at risk of discrimination or in violence, help them find safe places to stay, help them to connect with loved ones and trusted people. Caring for yourself and your colleagues, getting ready to help. As a helper, it is important to pay extra attention to your own well-being. Consider how you best get ready to help to be a helper in a crisis situation or setting. Whenever possible, learn about crisis situations and roles and responsibilities of different kinds of helpers. Consider your own health, personal and family issues. This is extremely important because, as we've already mentioned, your own well-being and health are equally as important as anyone else's, and to be able to provide this support, you need to ensure that it is where it needs to be to then be able to take on other people's own experiences. So that leads to making a nice decision about whether you are ready to help, and if you aren't, that's absolutely fine. You just need to make sure that you're in a position to provide that help and that your own well-being will be able to take on this extra pressure. Managing stress, healthy work and life habits. Consider how you can best manage your own stress to support and be supported by your fellow helpers. Think about what has helped you cope in the past. Take time to eat, rest and relax, even for short periods. Try to keep the reasonable working hours so that you don't feel exhausted or overwhelmed. Remember that you are not responsible for solving people's problems. Check in with your fellow helpers. Talk with friends, loved ones or other people you trust for support. Rest and reflection. Taking time to rest and reflect is an important part of ending your helping role. The following suggestions may be helpful to your own recovery. Talk about your experience with a supervisor, colleague or someone you trust. Acknowledge what you were able to do to help others, even in small ways. Learn to reflect on and accept what you did well, what did not go very well, and the limits of what you could do in these circumstances. Take some time, if possible, to rest and relax before beginning your life and work duties again. So practicing what you've learned. Here's a case study example that you can read through that may be relevant to your work life at the moment. You may be experiencing this as schools begin to reopen again. It'll probably take 5 to 10 minutes. So if you have a read through and try to think about the key components that we've discussed throughout this training and how you may be able to provide psychological first aid support if you were in this case study. These are key points that you can consider in this scenario. So as you prepare to help, some things that you could think about is whether you have a pre-existing relationship with the child or children. Is there someone better suited in your bubble team to offer the support they need? Are some of the children going to need more support than others? What should you look for? Are there any children who look as though they're particularly struggling that may need more immediate attention? How best can you listen? How will you introduce yourself to offer the support? How will you approach and help the children or adolescents? And then what can you do to link with people? What basic needs might people have? What services do you know that are available? How can people access them? What resources and training do you have to support these children and young people? Are there any support services in the school or external support services that can help you to support these children? As I said, this activity may take 5-10 minutes or even longer if you want to spend longer on it, but it would be really good to have a go just to practice and embed what you've learned throughout this training. Thank you for taking the time to listen and watch this training session. We hope it is helpful. Thank you from the team here at Wolverhampton EPS.